This is my small block 400 that I built over on the Primal TV YouTube channel. If you haven't seen that, you should check it out. It's out of an 80s Firebird, and I'm dying to get it back in for the summer here. Now, when I built this motor, I made a terrible mistake. I forgot to read the instructions. Or in other words, I purposely didn't read the instructions. I read them afterwards. When I installed these valve springs on here, I was supposed to subtract 1/1000th of an inch from the valve spring installed height measurement prior to shimming them. So I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to fix that without taking these heads off. We're going to do it on the motor. I'm going to show you guys how. This is the micrometer that I used, and you can see that there's this recession in the top. That's where the valve spring retainer, it sits down in there. And I failed to read the instructions that if your retainer is small enough to sit inside this recession, you need to take off 1/1000th of an inch. That's what this lip is worth here. So that's why we're going back in. Everything we're going to use today is going to be off Amazon. This is an Orion Motortech leak down test kit. This goes on your air compressor, screws into your spark plug hole on your cylinder head, fills your cylinder with air pressure, and measures the amount of leak down. This is a good way to test that your valve is sealed to the valve seat, a good way to test your rings, overall engine health type of test. We're not going to be using it for that. We're going to use it for a totally different purpose. We'll get to that in a minute. This is the cheapest valve spring compressor you can get on Amazon. It's basically a pry bar. This hole's going to end up on the rocker stud with the rocker nut tightened, and it's going to compress our valve. I've got my valve cover off here, which is pretty easy to do because I don't even own hold downs for it yet. And I can tell that these two valves are closed. There's no pressure coming up from the push rods. So we're going to take these rocker arm nuts off. We'll save those nuts, we'll be using them. There's our rocker arms off. We want to remember exactly where those came from, so we'll line them up in order on the workbench over there. If I hadn't just built this motor, this would be a good time to check our push rods for being straight and that the oil port is clear. I just put this together a few days ago, so I know they're good. Now this is the Orion Motortech leak down tester. This is an M14 spark plug thread. So we'll screw that into the cylinder head. This kit has an M12 and M10 adapter for a smaller motor. We're not really doing a leak down test here, but we're going to use this to pressurize the cylinder, and it's going to hold our valves up and closed while we work on our valve spring height. So we'll thread this in here. We'll hook this end up to our leak down tester. We'll hook the other end to our air compressor. And we're going to fill this cylinder with air. I'm going to spare you listening to the air compressor. This chrome piece of junk's in the way of everything. We've got our valve spring compressor, which goes on like so. The rocker arm nut goes on the rocker stud. And that rocker arm nut and rocker stud becomes a pry point. This acts as a pry bar, compresses our spring. As you can see there, the valve is going down with the spring. In other words, the air pressure is not holding it up. I'm gonna turn that up. Get 100 pounds in there and see if that does the trick. I turned this up to 120 pounds. Blew this O-ring here out. So I'm going to take this apart, T-tape it, come back to you. Okay, so my little Mastercraft compressor can barely keep up, but we have got to a point where I've got enough pressure in this cylinder to hold the valve closed while I compress the spring, remove the retainers, remove the seat or the cup, and then remove the spring, replace the spring with the micrometer, and put the retainers back in to hold the valve up. Now if my compressor runs out of air in between those 2 points, this valve will fall into the cylinder and I'll be taking these heads back off. So it's a race against time here with this junk Mastercraft compressor that you see there. I'm gonna do my best to get this done. So as soon as I put air into it, with this regulator valve just below the screen here, I'm gonna pry down on this, use this magnet to remove the clips, get this pry bar out of the way as fast as I can, remove the spring cup, the spring, replace the spring with the micrometer, put the retainer clips back in, and then get a new measurement off this micrometer. So here we go. Of course, that retainer wants to be a pest. The other one's in my mouth. We were not able to get it done in time. We got one retainer out, one still in, which really sucks. Okay, I finally got the retainer out. The compressor's running. We're running out of air. I'm trying to hold on to this valve with a pair of needle nose so it doesn't fall into the cylinder. There's the spring. Retainer off the magnet. There's one shim. There's the other shim. And I need to get my one shim back in there, and micrometer in there, spring cup, and both retainers.
shut the air off.
Okay, so we've got the micrometer here now, and it's what's holding the valve up. As you can see right now, we're reading exactly 1.80 installed spring height. Spec on one of these motors is 1.7-ish, depending who you ask. This type of micrometer requires you to subtract 1/1000th of an inch off of your measurement. Right now we're at 1.80. You can see the 8 here, and this is the 0 mark. So we'll hold the top, spin the base until this is snug up on the valve. We're measuring 1.845 minus 1/1000th of an inch, 1.745 with 1.015 shim in there. So after the 1/1000th of an inch we have to subtract, we've got about 1.745 here, which I'm happy with for an installed spring height. Since we're going to pick that, what we need to have on each and every other one of these springs is we need to be within 20/1000ths of an inch. So 1.725 to 1.765 is going to be our allowable range, setting the height on the rest of these springs here. So now that we're happy with those numbers, we're going to push air back into the cylinder, loosen the micrometer, take these retainers out, take the micrometer off, replace the valve spring with just the one shim that we have in there now, because it's giving us the measurement we want. Put the retainers back in, all hopefully before we run out of air, and drop this valve into the cylinder and have to tear this motor right back down. Wish me luck. Okay, we got one retainer in. We ran out of air. Luckily we got one in time, so we didn't lose the valve. Now we just got to do it again and again and again and again and again 16 more times.